obviously this is a corporate story, but I mean, at a strategic level, this is happening at a time when the U.S. and other allies are discussing roping Japan in, letting it come in to what's known as the AUKUS Pact, so they can share and develop technology of the future together, like AI, like hypersonic weapons, etc. But here we're talking about smokestack industry here. We're talking about steel. What is the problem? Is this simply because we've got an election coming up in 6 months' time?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think you nailed it. I think this is 100% because of the election. In a normal year, I think this would have been approved. It would have gone through. We wouldn't be talking about this. But not only is this a fairly close election for President Biden, former President Trump, but it's also a pretty close election for several key senators in battleground states where there's a lot of steel produced and steel workers that are voting. So we're talking about Pennsylvania and Ohio senators that are coming out in opposition to the deal. It really doesn't have much more of anything to do in fact than that, honestly. It's obviously the highest bid that was made for U.S. Steel's assets. I mean, they conducted a strategic review. The process was fully disclosed. But at the end of the day, we're seeing just more nationalistic behavior for a company that happens to have U.S. in its name. So I think the crosshairs of having U.S. in its name, it being an election year for senators and, of course, a close presidential race, and this has all just gotten completely politicized.
The price reaction, Timna, the stock's at 41, finished Friday at 41. The bid's at 55. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells you most shareholders or investors or traders, I suppose, just don't believe the deal is very likely to go through. And I think the majority view from what we can tell is that it's facing some serious challenges, probably can't go through easily until after the election. And there's still a chance that perhaps it could skate through when things get quiet and everything's died down after the vote is cast. But clearly, the stock reaction is telling you that people don't believe a $55 value is out there. It's pretty sold off, actually, even on a relative basis to peers. So I think there's a clear response that this deal is not likely to go through at least anytime soon.
That said, Timna, you've upgraded US Steel to outperform. You've got a $46 price target. What does that assume in terms of the outcome of this particular deal?
Our base case is that this is a standalone entity in a year's time, and we'll be talking about U.S. Steel just as it was before this, hubbub and strategic review process began. And ultimately, U.S. Steel on a standalone basis to us is worth the value that you mentioned, the mid-40s, and especially when you look at price responses of the peers. So it's an easy call, we think, in terms of relative valuation. There's been a big run in steel stocks that's kind of contradicted the underlying steel performance. But irrespective, U.S. Steel is building out its mini mill assets at Big River 2. It's expanding into some high-value electrical steel. And just looking at that value alone and on our pretty conservative estimates relative to the street, we think of easily the stock shouldn't go below mid-40s. And, there's some talk about, competitor coming out with the lower price bid and trying to kind of lowball the offer. But the fact is, U.S. Steel doesn't have to accept that. And we think, again, the standalone value easily on our numbers is mid-40s.